That's on. I think we do have 4:30. As chair of the Park and Rec Committee of the City of Wausau, I would call the Monday, November 5 session to order. If we have anybody who would like to comment on anything that is appearing on today's agenda, you can do so now, or we're fairly informal. If you want to raise your hand when we get to a topic, you can also comment then. Anybody want to kick us off? Seeing nobody running for the microphone. We need a motion to approve the minutes. I did have a question on what a ejector pit was, but I think I can get that answered later.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Second, Mr. Neal. Question, comment, fix-its?
Yeah, I have a question. I chaired that meeting. That doesn't mean I have perfect memory of it, though. But I'm trying to find it now on my little iPad here. The question on the free pool usage and the recommendation that came out of our vote, I think is not reflecting at least what I was voting on, and I don't think that's what the question was. I'm referring to the element concerning Wednesday night free, and in the discussion there was talk about Wednesday night was not really great because it kind of conflicted with concerts on the square, and that Tuesdays or Thursdays were perhaps better because they're low usage nights. So it might be a good night to use as a promotional option instead of Wednesday. So I thought we were voting to not do the Wednesday and to do Thursday, not Wednesday and Thursday as the minutes reflect. I don't know if anybody else has that same memory.
Mr. Gisselman?
I don't have the minutes right in front of me right now, but I think I'm not sure who made the motion, but it seems to me that I was one of the, which would include a Wednesday and Thursday nights as free. I thought that's what the gist of one part of that motion.
Yeah, I watched the meeting and that was the impression I got, but Tom's version would make perfect sense, but that wasn't what I saw.
Perhaps later in the evening when we're doing our update is an actionable item that we can alter the verbiage of the proposal going to council and finance, or it's going to finance as well?
It's already been to finance.
So it's going to be going to, because it just doesn't make any sense to me why we would have, the two nights, especially in the face of the financial impact of that, but rather switching a free night from Wednesday to, let's say, Thursday. So that's what I would hope that we would bring forth from the committees.
Where would we put that on the agenda?
Yeah, I don't know. It's only covered in the update later on. I don't know if it's an actionable item tonight.
Just have an update.
It's educational. I don't know that we can discuss it. Anybody's thoughts?
As far as looking at this motion, again, Gisselman, seconded by Nutting, to have free rotating Sundays at the pools, a free beginning and a free ending at all pools, free Wednesday evening and free Thursday evenings at all the pools, and have the city administration perform sponsorship outreach to help pay for the free swim opportunities. That was the motion that I made, and I think that's pretty much what the motion said that I made.
I don't see any trouble, when it does go to council, that it could be raised. Possibly I could raise it as an amendment to the resolution.
I think that'd be excellent, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Anything else on minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. We're going to dive into item 4, discussion and possible action on request for holiday displays at the 400 block and in city parks. Ms. Polly is going to present this for us, and we do have the city attorney in-house for any clarification that we may need. So go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is being brought forward in conjunction with the city's attorney's office. It was a request that was made in 2017 for a possible live nativity scene at the 400 block or within a city park. And at that time, there was not a plan of action to respond to the request, so in anticipation for it coming forward in 2018, or the promise was made that we would have something going forward that we could react to. After really diving into our current special events policy and procedures, I did feel in my interpretation and working with our city clerk's office and our department on when we rent out facilities and what we have in place. We did include a copy of that events policy in your packet as well, so you can review what we currently have. But I feel that it's pretty comprehensive and that it does cover pretty much any event that would come forward. There's a few questions in there that not only are raised from this type of request, but from any request that were to happen in our city parks compared to some of the ordinances that we have in place. And those are some of the things I am asking the committee tonight to clarify and provide us direction on how you'd want to proceed, and we can do some further updates to either our ordinance or our events policy. But when looking at a live nativity in general, you think of possibly people and animals being on display for a while in a park, no matter what the background of that display is. Currently, our events policy would cover that, but one of the items in our city ordinance that would have to be followed, or there's a couple things in our city ordinance, just like there's sound regulations and our permitting for alcohol. It's all in our special events policy. One other thing that would come into play with a live nativity or a petting zoo, for instance, is our city code 8.08.010, which prohibits farm animals in city parks. We do have a provision to that, though, in 8.08.190 that states that no animals shall be allowed in the 400 block during organized special events as approved by the city unless one of the following conditions are met. And then that animal is performing in or is on display for an event or show approved as part of a special event. So the way it is now is a petting zoo, display of animals for an activity such as this would fall under that 8.08.19 and would be allowed in the 400 block in the city parks if the special events policy were approved. Now, a special events policy, as you look at any special event that comes through, it always looks at what else is in that park or on the 400 block at that time, how it's being used, if it impedes any delivery of any services or it impedes traffic of use of the park. So the events policy, we take into all of those stipulations. But one thing that needs to be looked at, and then we looked at this even further, the only event that we have on the 400 block right now that currently has animals is either a dog show where they're controlled up on stage as part of the show, or we have had a petting zoo as part of our the Wausau events Harvest Fest, I believe it was. One thing I noticed in that code that I would like direction upon from the committee is we don't have any regulations as to the size of the animals or whether or not the animals should be fenced or controlled in any way. So, a petting zoo typically comes and brings their little fence, but there's not a regulation saying they have to do so. I don't know if it's in the city's best interest to have the possibility of an animal of any size possibly get away and run, throughout the city. So one of the things I think we need direction on is, should there be, as part of that ordinance, some sort of more regulation put in place for that, for any size animal, whatever that might be. The other part is our events policy does regulate the hours of usage for the park, so it's 10 a.m. to midnight. We don't typically allow things in the park overnight. We have allowed people to come in and set up tents ahead of time We worked that out as part of the special events policy. But most of the props and stuff does not covered under the special events is to be taken down every night at midnight, put back up each day. We also have a fee for our special events. We have a park rental fee for any event that happens in any of our parks, including the 400 block. And then we have a special event fee that has different classes. One of the things that no matter what comes, I think we would like clarification on too is we have a multi-day fee, which is a flat fee of $250 for multiple days, consecutive days. We do not have a limit on what those consecutive days are. So if someone wanted to come in for 3 days, they would pay $250. If they wanted to come in for 14 days consecutively, they'd pay $250. I think I'm suggesting that we put a limit on what those consecutive days are. If we put 7 days on there and they want 14 days, then they just pay the multiple day fee twice. Same with the serial day events. Now our concert in the square are every Wednesday for, I believe it's 12 weeks. I talked to the Wausau area events staff today. I had suggested in here that maybe we put a cap on that of 15. I think we want to keep, and we'll come back with the right amount. We'll talk with especially Wausau area events, who has most of the ongoing events, so that we're not hindering them at all. But I think that looking at other communities, special events guys, especially in a high valued park like the 400 block that has a lot of need and a lot of wants for that, plus the high usage of it, we need to maintain the grass, the turf, the park, having some sort of guidelines to help establish those. The city of Racine is one we looked at quite closely because they have a monument square just like the 400 block. They have a maximum of 10 events per entity each year. So they try to, it's open to everybody. The park is open to everybody. We cannot hinder who uses the park for any means, but in order to regulate it and to manage it and to foresee any concerns that we might have that aren't specifically clear in our ordinances, there's just a couple of things to clarify that arose out of potentially looking at this type of a use. I know I just talked about a lot of different things, so hopefully I didn't confuse everybody.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Well, a couple things. Just the question of events themselves and animals. I mean, wouldn't this fall underneath the purview of Public Health and Safety Committee for the most part? Issues related to utilization of parks and whatnot, I think would fall on us. But things like, animals being allowed or not, or how big and how they'll be managed or whatnot, that's public health and safety. And any new or unusual event, again, that would go through them too. They'd have to look at the event case by case basis to approve them. On a park usage viewpoint, though, I'm a little concerned about somebody sort of contracting for a long sort of usage of the park, of any park, after days and days and days, and somebody comes along and they want to do something and say, oh, it's already been taken for this whole section of a season, let's say. So I'm a little concerned about that some of the minutia about days, limits, fees, things like that, or something that I'd like to see some good recommendations for us to consider. The other items really aren't really ours, I think.
I think we could take a swing at them, but were you thinking that we would, it says here, maybe that this committee would make some suggested changes and then you would bring them back for action?
Correct. That is what we would do. We wanted to get some input from, as far as the park usage, from this committee, and then if we were to do an ordinance update, that would go through the proper channel. So if it was dealing with the animals and that, we would take that through health and safety and any committee that it would need to go through. But it would just, because it's all kind of encompassing on park usage, it would also come back just to give you an update on where it is, but to get your thoughts to begin with.
I would think that we would, on the size of the animal and whether the animal should be restrained or controlled, and how many consecutive days somebody could book the park and serial day limits, I think we could weigh in on all of those and then send that to Public Health and Safety and say, this is what we want. How about you guys? Mr. Nutting.
Yeah, I would agree with Alderman
That's Neil there.
Mr. Neal. Thank you.
Yeah.
Senior moment there.
Been sitting next to you for a couple of years.
With regards to extended use, maybe that would be something that we would put into a contract that would be on a case-by-case basis, and we would evaluate that as requested and the length as requested. And that would be something that wouldn't be carte blanche there that you could grab and go, but grab and have it evaluated and then let it be approved. That might be something that I was thinking off the cuff here, especially if that was something that was being considered for extended periods of time. And that...
Could I interrupt? Are
Yes.
you saying that we should have a number, or we should make that call individually as the applications come in?
That was my thought. As individually as applications come in, that might be something that that committee, which is making the approval, would that was just a thought.
Okay.
As
As soon
an
as you're
idea.
done, we'll
As
ask
an idea,
Mr. Straub
yeah.
to come up. Do you have anything else?
The only other thing was with regards to animals, and that would, again, a case-by-case basis, that they would define how the animal or animals would be tethered, controlled, fenced, etc., and the type of fence that would be likely approved or likely that would be used at the fair, something similar to that. It would be logical that anyone who is handling the animals would know how to handle them and would be addressing the restraints if necessary. Yeah. That's
Mr.
my
Straub,
thoughts,
would you
my
like
thoughts.
to come up to the microphone? Name, rank, serial number.
My name is James Straub. I'm the one who made the initial inquiry last fall, and never once did live animals ever come up. I don't know where this came from. I would prefer if we stuck to our situation here so that we would know if we can proceed with our plans or not. And this is a Christmas display is what we're talking about, the conventional one with the shepherds and the baby Jesus and whatnot. We would like to have it up for the Christmas season, perhaps 6 weeks. So from what we are talking here, this, we don't have a chance.
So is your proposal that it would be an unattended display that would be set up for a period of...
On the stage, yes, for the Christmas season.
Okay, I guess we were
With
thinking
lights,
it was going to be
music.
an event where there would be
No, a Christmas
quote
display.
performers.
So I spoke at length with the city attorney at that time. It seemed like our main concern was the religious nature of this and all the lawsuits that are going to be springing up that this is, this is religious in
concern.
nature and the public. We can't do this on public property. I thought
is a
that was the
concern.
main issue.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that one too.
But the live animals, no camels or donkeys, no sheep.
Very good.
They would be wood cutouts or something of that nature is what we're talking about. So,
Okay,
So
but have you applied for anything yet for this year?
no, the mayor called me up a couple of days ago, and I didn't even know what he was talking about. This was a year ago when this first came up. The city attorney said at that time, she said, we don't have enough time to get this through all the committees. It'll be after Christmas before it would get approved. So she said, why don't you try again next year? So that's where we are right now.
Okay.
So, but like I say, it's a very conventional type of a thing that you see in front of many churches around. There was, we don't have any new ideas on this. In fact, one of the key issues here is we wanted to invite all the churches to be part of this. We have so much hatred and fighting and all the other stuff. This is one thing that we can agree on and would bring our community together on at least one topic, that there was a baby Jesus, and we can recognize that.
Okay, thank you. Ann, could you fill us in on where we might go with this? Seems like we're quite restricted when it would come to something like that.
Okay, I apologize, Mr. Straub, if something else got in there, but we were thinking about all the things we might need to consider when we come to using the 400 block, which would be animals, and I know there wouldn't be any alcohol involved or loud noise in your case, but these were all ordinances that Jamie mentioned we'd have to take into account. If he went and filled out a special event application now, he would follow the one we have in effect, correct? For use of the stage or lighting or electrical, and it would get sent to all the, department heads and then brought to public health and safety, except right now, what's the longest usage of the 400 block on either the 400 block reservation form or in the special events policy for a class 3 multiple day event? Is it restricted to like 3 days?
No, we don't have a
not?
current restriction.
There is no restriction.
There's no restriction.
And are there any other events with which this would conflict? I mean, we're kind of walking through right now his application, which is a little premature because he'd need to fill it out in writing, of course, and bring it to public health and safety. But just talking in terms of where we would go, so animals are not an issue.
Right. We don't have in our policy, one thing we do not have is, someone wants to just set up a display. We were under the understanding when we discussed that there would actually be people, actors that kind of being part of the display. If that's not the case, then it's more of just a display that's going to sit there, which we don't necessarily, it's not considered an event, and it's not considered, it's a display, but when we have a definition, I put that in the memo, a definition of a display is an event that, where did I put it?
So this is an inert display, in other words, with no live people, no live animals, but you wouldn't be taking it down every night and putting it back up the next day when the park is closed, so that would be one issue.
Right, and so a display, when I looked it up, by definition is a performance show or event intended for public entertainment. Just in a display, just like putting a sign up in the park, we don't have a specific fee for that. We could add, a class 4 fee or something for a sign, and then I think with that, we cannot really restrict what goes in the park. The park has to be open to the public, so I don't think that we're necessarily concerned. At this point, with the religious nature of it, we have to have our park available to everybody. But that means that if another group were to come and want to put something in the park, we have to be able to accommodate that depending upon. We do have a restriction in our events policy about using more than a fourth of the park or other events that go on it. Now, during the winter, one thing that I was going to get to that we need to consider is that we set up an ice skating rink, a warming house, an ice sculpture, and a Christmas tree. And there is a holiday event. Now, I haven't been around for the holiday event yet, so I don't know if the stage is being used, but if it is, that would be, one thing we'd have to consider. But looking at our layout of the park, there's probably room for one activity or display such as this in an area. However, we don't have the ability to offer it to other groups. So that is something that we, as the city, can restrict what goes in the parks just because of the sheer usage of what's happening. Like on a Wednesday night when you're having your performances from the Wausau area events, we can technically allow somebody to use a quarter of the park while that's going on per our policy, but just because of the sheer largeness of that event, we would deny that request no matter what that would be. So that's something to consider for the winter, is that park is heavily populated with what we set up with the ice skating rink, warming house, sculpture. So that's just something to consider. But we have a policy for events, performances, shows, for entertainment purposes. We don't have something in our policy right now for something that would be set up in the park as far as a display. I don't know if it would fall under a signage policy, such as, like political sign campaigns and promotional campaigns for businesses. I don't know, if someone came forward with that, if that would be considered the same thing. It's really for viewing, so that may be a different.
The whole zoning code is being overhauled right now, and signs would be included in that. So we're not enforcing the current code when it comes to signage.
Okay. I think understanding if this was going to be, a display using live actors, then it would fall definitely under this. So we apologize for maybe the miscommunication and just say a display versus people.
So would the process be that they would fill out an application form and go through public health and safety?
Yes. But I think, as you pointed out earlier, the Parks and Rec should weigh in on what your goals are for the use of parks. And do you want to allow these in other city parks or limit it to the 400 block? You know, you have to decide what you want to allow in the parks. If you want to limit it to certain parks, do we want to add another class event for multiple days, like Jamie mentioned? Do you want to say 7 days and no longer so that we can accommodate all requests? So you're either going to end up denying all such requests and only allowing the city and Wausau events or whatever to be in there, or you're going to allow everybody or deny everybody. But I think because you can't go based on content, obviously. That's the whole religious thing and freedom of expression and freedom of religion. We can't go on a case-by-case basis and deny or allow these events based on the content. That's what we cannot do.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I think that with any of our park facilities, all of the facilities that are within our parks are available to the general public, sort of on a first come first served basis. You know, I want to rent a shelter or the big kitchen or a particular place at a particular city park. You go in and apply, and you've got it for that day or that period of time, based on your reservation, your fee, etc. I would think that this would be something that we should develop an idea that it would be a sponsored, maybe there would be a sponsored sign as to who's sponsoring this, and maybe even it's sponsored and it's here for this period of time, based on what we typically do throughout all our parks, first come, first serve. You know? Something that we could consider. That would be my thoughts.
Yes, sir. Mr. Neal.
Yeah, we just need to not conflate the idea of an event with the idea of renting some square footage for a 24-hour-a-day, X number of days display. I mean, I don't think we have anything in our policy that addresses that. I mean, where do you start? I mean, you have to make that policy up first before it can be allowed. It's not as simple maybe as one might think. Let us put this thing up. It has to be according to city, set policy, and something that is applicable to everybody in the city. They want to do a similar thing, for whatever organization, purpose, whatever. And then where can it be done? How can it be done? All of those issues have to be covered via policy. And we can't just shoot from the hip on it. So, and we really, if it's something that's going to be there 24 hours, I mean, by definition, and it's not going to be taken down, it's not an event. It doesn't fall underneath, our purview as, looking at events. And certainly has nothing to do with public health and safety at all. This is a policy issue.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. And when I read the packet, my understanding was that it would be an event that would take place, during the day for several days running, and then it would evaporate and it would rematerialize in the morning. But this is a different kettle of fish. Ann, could you clarify it? My understanding when I first got wind of this was that there would be an issue with a religious display on public property. Are you saying that we cannot discriminate on the basis of the content of a display like that?
Right. You can't go on content. So it's you can restrict the use of public property to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. So you can restrict multiple length displays or all religious nature displays, I guess you could say, or no religious displays on public property, because you don't want to endorse any one religion over another. So you're either going to allow all of them, all the requests that come forward, or none of them. It's basically how that works. But you can restrict what public property is used for.
So we don't have that language
To certain
now.
time or place or manner, certain park, the 400 block, not overnight, not for 6 weeks, or for 6 weeks or however long you want it. But you can't really go on a case-by-case basis. Tom is right. You need to treat everybody consistently and have a policy going forward.
Okay.
I don't know how helpful I've been. This is tough because you're right. It is a display. It's not an event. So, but I think it still needs the lawmakers' permission to be there for multiple days because we don't have anything else right now that regulates somebody putting up a display on that block for that period of time.
And we certainly can't have the appearance, well, it might have the appearance, but we can't de facto sponsor something as the city of a religious nature. I mean, that just doesn't go with the charter. We can't,
Correct.
Say, yeah, we'll let you do that, and it's kind of brought to you by the city of Wausau. We can't do that. So.
Mr. Smith.
So what we're saying here, if we open this up to put a nativity display, then if somebody comes to us, a group of Satanists, and they want to put up a display that says there is no God, we would have to accommodate them.
Yes.
And then if a group of witches come and want to have a display, we have to accommodate them.
Yes.
And then any other religion that would be, Muslim or any other, that they have a day comparable to Christmas or it's important to them, we'd have to open up to them also, right?
Yes.
My biggest concern is the display down there unattended overnight. If it gets vandalized, who's responsible for it? There are a lot of people out there that don't like Christmas, don't like Christians, and it seems the main sport around Christmas time is stealing the baby Jesus out of the manger. It happens all the time. Usually they bring baby Jesus back, but they take it for a while and then they sober up and then they bring it back. But
all of our events, in fact, we do require insurance. Now, this is a display technically and not an event, so it would be a long-term display. Would you intend to insure that display? Yeah, and I'm sure the city of Wausau can't be held responsible if it's vandalized because the park's closed overnight. It's not monitored. Okay.
Yeah. Ms. Polly?
If I may add, so in your packet, I did put the City of Wausau events policies and procedure, and the goal of the policies and procedure is for the City of Wausau to encourage and coordinate special community events while regulating these events in a positive manner to ensure health and safety for participants. That's for the whole Wausau events policies and procedure for special events, and then it defines what an event is. Now, we have a separate, I did not include this in your packet because I didn't think that we would need it, but I do have it here for your review, is we have a separate 400 block policy and reservation form that was put together, and I believe, well, I should have been adopted, I believe, by this committee. But the block usage says may be reserved through the city clerk's office for free events and activities of interest to the general public, keeping with accepted standards of behavior and contact, and up to 25% of space can be rented. But it's a public park for use and enjoyment of the public at all times. I think that from what I'm understanding from these two policies is the intent of our parks, 400 block included, is for people to enjoy it, but if people want to rent it, it's for community events. I would say that from a regulation standpoint, if we're talking about an event and a live action activity that falls underneath here, and we'd want to support it as part of our goal that's stated here. I think displays are different. If you want to, I don't think that's the intent of our parks, is to allow displays in our parks of any kind, because you could have, right now we're in the political season, hopefully it's over tomorrow, thank goodness, but you could have somebody come forward and want to put a display for one of the candidates in the park, and then our parks get over, like we said, you cannot restrict one from the other. If you're going to allow one, you allow all of them for whatever that topic is. So I would recommend from a staff perspective that we stick to our parks being there for public usage of events and activities, not for displays of any manner. But that's something just to clarify, I guess, of the committee based on what our goals are in these two documents.
Yes, sir. We do have a citizen
Right, we
and
do have a
behind you.
citizen, yes.
Why don't we, hate to have you stand too long there.
Jerry Buer, my name. I live downtown. I'm a retired, semi-retired sociologist, and one of my areas of so-called expertise is the sociology of religion. So I've been interested, particularly the last probably 2 decades, in all the cases nationally where there have been issues of religious items in, say, public buildings, particularly. I'm thinking 10 Commandments and courthouses and the like. And there have been many instances of that type of thing. And I am concerned from the standpoint, I'm very sympathetic to the displays, but I think Councilman Smith hit upon that point, that if you permit one group, even though it's by far the majority group in the community, you are opening the door this day and age into other people who probably would not have made any issue of having their symbolism or whatever they want displayed if this other group had not. And I think that rather than kind of stir the waters, it would probably be best to do as the attorney advised, to limit things to events and not displays, that you would avoid a lot of problems. I live downtown. Within about 6 to 7 minutes, I can, if I'm so inclined, I can walk to at least 2 Lutheran churches, 2 Catholic churches, a UCC church, a Methodist church, a Presbyterian church, a Unitarian church. Believe me, there's going to be at least a couple displays out there, nativity scenes, if I recall from the past. And well, I don't happen at this time to belong to any one of those bodies. I still am what I refer to as a free-range Christian, and I'm sympathetic and I enjoy those displays, but I don't think I want one in the 400 block, especially since my apartment looks out on the 400 block. Thank you.
Would we have a motion to clarify the policy on the 400 block that events do not include static displays that are left for long periods of time?
I'm not making that motion. I just wanted.
Would you like to talk?
I would like to talk because I feel that
Go right ahead.
I think that this committee should have something in front of it with regard to exact wording of a policy rather than making something up on the fly, so to speak. I think that we should be a little bit more deliberate. But I'm also wondering how we are going to be able to deliver to Mr. Straub an answer on this, because I think the staff, I think we have to, between the city attorney's office and Park, come up with some kind of a wording of this exact policy and not necessarily have it on the fly. I want to make sure that this policy is exactly right and exactly right as far as it moves to the city council. I'm just very leery about moving on that this evening, but yet I'm concerned about delivering some kind of an answer to Mr. Straub so that he knows as we go on. Maybe if we have a special meeting of this committee at some time within the next few weeks so that we can get some kind of an answer for him. But I think we need an exact policy with regard to how that ordinance should read and then move on that.
Would you make a motion to ask staff?
Can I add something first?
Okay, before we go there.
Well, I want to bring forward that you have a policy and procedures in place
I understand that, but it doesn't specifically speak to the request that we have in front of us this evening.
But it does specifically
regard to
state
this-
that it's for events, and it defines events in that policy. I think that events they're defined here, and they, are parades, processions, festivals, athletic events, events requiring street closures, that sort of thing. They're active events, and it says even in our 400 block policy that they are, they are free events and activities that generate the interest of the public. So I think we have a policy. I think all you would need to do to that policy, I don't think it's an ordinance, and Ms. Jacobson can clarify that if it needs to be an ordinance, but I think you can add to this is that an event does not include a static display. I mean, we don't have that specific, but we do have a pretty extensive policy in place. I'm not sure that we need to have a whole separate policy for static displays.
Those words would have to be included into any type of document that we have going forward, as well, maybe even as part of the ordinance.
And that is what I'm asking the committee tonight, is to comment on this. So I'm not asking you to make a motion one way or the other to approve or deny this request. There's a number of things I've asked for this document, one being this is something that we can add. We can bring that back to you. The other ones is when you look at the Class 1 and Class 2 multi-day and serial day events, I'm asking for input on whether or not we should clarify those and I did make a recommendation in our packet with 7 days for the multi-day, serial days being a maximum of 15 occurrences. So those two things I'm asking for. I also made a recommendation in the packet that asked us to add language that address some of the concerns that were brought up earlier. We got this from the city of Racine as well, who has a park similar to this, and that is to add language in the policy that says, permits to use the City of Wausau parks, including the 400 block, do not constitute City of Wausau or Wausau Marathon County Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department endorsement of these policies, beliefs, and goals of the sponsor, nor shall advertisement. I am asking you to consider telling staff to put that in the policy for review, so that it can clarify that we are open to anything in these parks as far as events. We could have any group come forward with an event, and as long as it doesn't hinder what else is going on in the park and meets all of the policies of the city, it would go there no matter who the sponsor is, but it would specifically say that these sponsors are on their own and they're not endorsed by the city. So there's a couple things I'm asking for your input on, and yes, we would then come back with a redlined revised event policy that would include these things for your approval.
Mr. Neal.
There, aside from this issue, which came up out of, I guess, a misunderstanding of a request, there might be other issues in the event policy that, it's like we go through the employee handbook, and it's a constantly changing document. There could be other things in our event policy, if you will, that we'd like to, revisit and revise as we go. And we can do it on a item-by-item basis, throughout the year. So that being the case, I support the recommended changes that have been brought forth, and I would move to approve them and move on, knowing that we'll see, an edited version, a final version, if you will, for us to act on. But secondly, if I can make two motions at one time, I don't know, is that possible?
We'll try one at a time.
Okay. I'll make that first one first and wait for a second, and then see if I can make another one in a minute.
So to clarify your motion, part of the motion is to incorporate the wording that
yes,
the city's allowing something to happen does not, make it equate to an endorsement of what's happening there.
that
Isn't
and
that
the
already
other
stated?
and the other items that have been introduced into the event policy, if any others are in there.
Which are? We need clarity.
Well, the items brought forward in the memo would be that disclaimer, and then to define serial day events, which made a recommendation of no more than the multiple day events, no more than 7 consecutive days, and for the serial events, no more than, I say 12 to 15. I think 15 would be my recommendation after talking with Wausau Area Events this afternoon. So those are the things we brought forward as far as specific. I think if we wanted to add something about an event, it does not include a static display, we could add that as well. But
Why don't we do that separately? Those three components, is that what
That's
you're
fine.
after?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Smith seconded. Is there any more discussion on that part? Mr. Nutting?
I was going to ask if we didn't already have a disclaimer in paper that says that this event, whatever it might be, is not sponsored by the city. Isn't there already something?
Apparently not.
I would be surprised if there wasn't. But because there's events that happen on the 400 block and other city parks that certainly have leanings one direction or the other, which, but if that isn't the case, there should be.
There's nothing that specifically states it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Very good. Any other comments on this motion?
Just a point, with the Wausau area, with Wausau events, do they not give credit to the city of Wausau as part of their signage at the, credit to the city of Wausau indeed for sponsoring Wausau events, and I think we have our name out front on those events. So
There might be a difference between
Oh, I know, but
sponsorship and endorsement.
In the, if you could look at my summary page, second page, the first paragraph, I didn't read the whole thing, but it does say, nor shall any advertisement or publicly indicated endorsement or sponsorship by the city or the park department without prior approval of a standing committee and or city's common council be done. So I am assuming that the support that the city council has given Wausau Events has approved that. I hope. If not, we'll make that happen.
Okay. On that three-part whammy by Mr. Neal, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. Would somebody like to make a motion to clarify what an event is and that perhaps it does not include a static display? Or are we satisfied with the...
I don't think we need to couch it in the form of any reference to event. We just can simply say that, we can establish the policy that, we are not going to rent out, if you will, display space to any parties in our parks.
Mr. Smith?
I was going to say about the same thing.
Microphone.
Mr. Neal said is, we're not going to allow a static display, whether it be a group of cutouts or whether it be a sign that says "Eat at Joe's." We're simply not going to allow that in any of our parks.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I was thinking that we would, Mr. Chair, I was thinking that maybe we would ask staff to come back to us with a static display option or a non-static display option. I think that that was my initial thought when before we were going for emotions here, and things got further along before I could interject. But
Okay. The motion at this point is that we don't allow static displays on the 400 block.
because I thought that earlier I had requested this
Clarify.
stage back.
I thought we had already put in there that we weren't going to allow static displays. I thought that was in Alderman Neal's motion. Was that not in there?
No.
No, it wasn't.
All right. Mr. Nutting, I don't believe that we can, if we open the door for one static display, then the whole family comes with it. Whether it be Satanists, whether it be witches, whether it be any type of nativity scene or a menorah or anything, that's all going to come. And so if we do that, we open that door. Once that genie's out of the bottle, it's not going to go back in the bottle. So we're going to have to deal with whatever displays that static or non-static displays are going to happen down there. And if, like I said, I made the note about Eat at Joe's. That's a static display. If we allow a static display, we could put a sign down on the 400 block that says Eat at Joe's. And as long as he pays the fee and everything, and it's not offensive to anybody, and the city's not endorsing that you should go eat at Joe's, it would probably have to be allowed. So we have to be careful what we allow, because we're allowing a lot more than just one static nativity display.
Any more discussion on the motion? Yes, sir.
Can somebody define static display?
Inanimate was one of the words used, and no movement, no person
So a
there.
signage of some sort.
Unattended.
Or unattended.
Unattended static display, that might be good to add.
Not, and standing alone, so static displays as part of an event, would that be okay?
Yes.
But, so static displays,
If you've got an event, if there's a run happening and you have a tent and you set up a
right,
sign
that's
next to
sort
the
of
tent,
what
I think we're all right
I'm
there.
just sort of,
Yeah. So we have unattended static display,
Related to an event.
unrelated to an event.
does the city put any displays or signage on this 400 block? I'm just asking the question because this is,
Not that I'm aware of. Mr. Nutting.
Well, what do you call the ice sculptures that are erected and standing there, and then you have this slide that's created, and the slide has a sign on it. It's Wausau area events or something. This is something that's a static display. It ain't going anywhere for a very long period of time, at least until the snow melts. Where are you going to draw the line here?
But it's part of an event.
That's an event. Are they?
Well, no, the slide isn't an event. The slide is a component of the event.
Yes.
I mean, I guess we could say if we put the ice rink down there, that's a static display. Doesn't move around a lot.
Nope, certainly don't.
So, I mean, I think any logical person would say a static display is a cutout that's put up there or a sign that's not related to an event. The snow sculptures and everything are related to that Winterfest we have. So, I mean, if I guess if we wanted to have a Christmas event on the mall, or I mean on the 400 block, then the sign would be related to that event. But that would be absolute suicide to do something like that, because the people down in Madison, the Freedom from Religion, would be up here in a van load climbing all over City Hall. And then we would be spending more money on legal fees, which we don't need to spend in the first place. So, and we have to be careful what we do here.
I would agree, and I wouldn't want our thought process here. If somebody wanted to do a live nativity scene, they could apply for it, I would assume, and if there was a fee associated with it and a time period from 8 until 8 p.m., it would be something that we wouldn't be limiting with this type, but an actual, that would be something that would move in and move out. Could be, and we're not locking that out, and I wanted to ask that off the hand here. I mean, okay.
I think your reading
Thank
on
you.
that is correct.
Thank you.
Judith, do you have something on this topic?
A question. Just a simple question. How do you quantify a Christmas tree? What is that? Is that not a static display, unattended?
I don't know. Any other comments from the committee on the motion that we have to define a static display as, define event as not including a static unattended display? Anything else?
My main concern is to not, open up, as Mr. Smith mentions, renting out space for organizations or individuals or political candidates or what have you to utilize our parks as a place to advertise. That's what I'm talking about. If the city puts up a holiday tree, which you can call a Christmas tree if you wish, or a Tannenbaum, or a decorated fir, whatever you want. That is a decoration, and we did not rent it out for anybody to make a statement on behalf of the organization. So that's the difference I'm seeing here.
Very good. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
4-1, I would vote for the motion. Thank you. Anything more on that particular time-consuming topic? Although it was fun. Go on to 5. Want to discuss and possibly act on establishing a subcommittee to discuss the development of a dog park. Mr. Straub, you have a final word?
What am I supposed to do? I don't have any direction whatsoever.
Right now, this committee has moved to, I don't know if we need to send that to the city council, but we've attempted to define a display as not an event, and yet you need an event. So I would say come into the clerk's office and apply and see if what see if what you're proposing fits. And I think you have to change what you're proposing.
Well, at this time, what the committee just moved to do is that if you are proposing a static display, it would not be approved as part of it. It would not be allowed in the 400 block or a city park per the policy.
Well, that's my answer then.
Okay.
Very good.
I thought this would be something good for us. We were going to invest a couple $100 and a lot of work, carpenters and electricians, 1,000 lights and whatnot. As far as the religious part of it, this has all been settled in the courts. We don't have to worry about that. In fact, the article that I brought in the day when I talked with the Knights of Columbus led that legal thing, and it allows.
You could come to the microphone, sir, please. We need to hear you.
I didn't bring the article with me, but the article explains that religious displays are permitted on public property. That has been settled, and we shouldn't have even to talk about that.
And we're not talking about that. We're talking about static unattended displays. So I guess they're two different critters. We want to get on to dog park. The mayor has agreed that if we want to have like a subcommittee named or some sort of ad hoc committee, that he would be in favor of that and would assist us in establishing that body. My thought in putting this on the agenda was I looked at where the dog park ranked in our CIP rankings, and of the ones that didn't get funded, the dog park idea was smack in the middle. And we have the option, of course, to leave it in the queue and see if it magically rises to the top next year, but I don't think that's going to happen unless we can sweeten the pot. We had a kind of an informal opportunity or promise, I guess, of the probability of a $35,000 contribution from community sources. So we were looking at a request of $108,000 to get to 143, and still at 108, we only got to the middle of the pile. So it's my opinion that we need, in order to move that up, I think we need to increase the amount of community donations or revamp, take another look at the size of the project, or do something. And I've made some initial inquiries to donors, just super informal, and I think we can do better than $35,000 without too much work, but we need to decide whether we want to try to, I don't know if there are any heroics that could make it happen for next year, but need to decide a chicken and egg question, whether we want to try to seek maybe $75,000 in city funding if we get the other half, or get the other half maybe and then come back and say, we got the other half, now will you give us 75 to get over the top, or whatever. So I think we need discussion of whether or not to do a committee, and then to give the committee some direction. Mr. Neal probably can lead us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I would certainly move to approve the establishment of the subcommittee. I would volunteer to be a member thereof. I would I would hope the stated goal of the committee would be to secure as close as we can get to 100% community involvement, because city involvement is going to be hard to drum up, because, like you said, we fell down there in the middle of the group underneath the red line, and there was not a lot of, 10,000 and 10,000 there lying around waiting to be scarfed up for something like this. So I think that the stated goal of the committee, for the most part, is outreach and contact and drumming up some, patrons to support this.
And how would you propose they go about it? Try to get as much money as they can, and then come back to the city and say, okay, we got 80.
We already have a site, and we already have a design, and we already have our hands around, the amenities and how much they cost, and and who would do what. For the most part, where we fall short is that money. So I think being able to do outreach and say, we've got this proposal, we have this park idea, we have an outline, we have a site, we need the money, for materials and construction and infrastructure, what have you, and see what we can drum up in the private sector.
Any other comments on that?
Maybe Mr. Mayor would like to come up and clarify his position on it.
Is that the guy in the light blue shirt there? Or
The guy in the back row.
gray, whatever it is.
I'm the genie. So,
Very good.
good evening, everybody. Mayor Robert Mielke. This is something that I am fully in support of, and seeing how we could not get it the other way during the budget and the CIP process, I think with the right type of marketing thing, ta-da, type of program, we could have it where private donations could cover the majority of that cost. This is something that I fully support and really do want. It's one of those things that attracts people as far as the quality of life, drawing folks to our city. And really, when I look at other surrounding communities, Wausau could really use one. Plus, I like dogs a lot, so I'm fully in support of it. Hence the reason why I had it put on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
I just wondered, are you thinking like 5 people?
Yes.
That we would submit some suggestions to you and you'd go from there, or what?
Oh, no, it's going to be a group effort. Trust me, I got enough things to do, but in all seriousness.
I mean, in terms of getting the committee named and launched.
Yes. 5 would be perfect. Be like a regular subcommittee. Usually they're like 5 to 7 at most. But 5 would be ideal.
Okay. Mr. Neal?
Mr. Neal?
And can you give us a little, temperature of, what is the city's wherewithal to cover any gap? If you say if we come up with most of it, what is most? And
well, as all of you know, the budget process, and every year, and all of us are veterans, every year it's getting tougher and tougher, because there's always a need for other things. I mean, we got infrastructure falling apart, buildings that are falling apart, and we can't just keep doing this Band-Aid approach, hence the reason why we've done some of the things that we have. That said, though, this is one of those quality of life things that people really like, that would be good as far as another attraction to the city. As far as on the city's end, yes, I would try to find a way to, if you want to call it a public-private type of venture, yes, I would be more in favor of that. But it's something, not just myself, but so many people, other folks want, and it's been brought forward here now, the 2 years that I've been in office. It's just something I'd like to get done.
I would have very high hopes for such a committee's success, or a subcommittee's success.
I do have one quick question, though. Are we still set on that site down on 4th, behind the old Rosemurgy?
I haven't really heard any other viable alternatives.
We're kind of landlocked, I understand that, but okay.
There's another one I have in mind that I'd be willing to discuss, but...
As far as this committee's formal actions, that's our favorite. And
well, part of that subcommittee, we could discuss other options,
Yeah.
but I would like to get it completed here.
Yeah, it does have the potential of, there's a chunk of real estate just on the north edge of it that we could also probably acquire if we had an extra few bucks.
Start playing the lottery, so.
There we go.
All right. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
how large is that spot if you were to compare it with a city block? I can't visualize it at the moment, but I know where it is.
I think Tom could probably explain
It's
that a little bit better. It's
2.5 acres, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when you compare that to what, Weston's 6? You know, again, we're landlocked.
I've been doing research about, what's a good size for a dog park, an urban dog park.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would call the Weston one so much an urban one. 2.5 acres is a good size for an urban dog park.
Okay. And then you got to worry about parking, et cetera. But yes, I'm all in favor as far as the subcommittee moving forward. Maybe not for 2019, but certainly by 2020 at the very latest.
Is the current park usable as is for what's on the park? Is it grassed over?
It's vacant land.
Is
It's
it
been
tall
vacant for
grass?
years.
Is it cut?
It's
It was just
pretty-
planted,
Yeah.
just seeded, and I think it's been mowed a couple of times over the summer.
So technically,
pretty ready.
it's usable as, right now, as a dog park in training?
Let's not do
Just
that.
doesn't have the fencing.
Let's just make sure we go through public health and safety too to make sure that all that is covered as well.
Sure.
Ms. Polly?
I could suggest that, is your intent with this to have some citizen members or some people who have?
Yes.
Okay. Should,
Yes.
if we do this and move forward, then our department could put out a call for applicants who are interested in being on the committee, and
Excellent.
then a couple that volunteer here could help do some interviews if we get more than, 5 people.
Just want to make sure they're Wausau residents.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, everyone.
We got a motion and a second on that? Somebody second? Motion was to approve the establishment of a subcommittee to work on a dog park, and we do need a second. Mr. Gisselman has been so gracious. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. We're going to get this done yet. Okay, educational items. You want me to kick right into that one? Follow-up to questions raised on September 4 regarding Wausau Riverside Park dioxin contamination letter. And this was discussed in October. Well, it started in September, but it was on October's agenda, and I was not present, so it was delayed. Are there questions or
Well, just the one thing, the
issues from this committee?
sort of clarification that we were given from the individual, there was about 2 sentences. It wasn't much of a clarification to me. I wasn't really, it's like my comment was meant to add clarification, but I don't know what the question was, and I don't know what the conclusion was, and how that clarified anything.
Basically, what I found is that if you ask a state employee of any stripe, should we do meat testing down there? Should we be concerned about that? They'll say, well, you can decide that, I think. And his remarks were to let us know kind of what the procedure would be if we chose to do that. But my mind is at ease with the report of the toxicologists that if a child and an adult together played down there for hours a day for weeks on end, that they would not, their dioxin levels or whatever would not approach a dangerous point. I think that answered any question I had about whether or not we need signage or further testing. I think, we're good there. Mr. Killian, I don't know if you want to weigh in at this point or if you're if this is your area of interest.
Hello, Tom Killian, 133 East Thomas Street. Yes, Mr. Peckham, this is my area of interest tonight. Mr. Neal, I kind of had the same confusion that you had with the DNR's response. I had talked to Mr. Thompson about it a few times, and as Mr. Peckham said, it does seem like the DNR perhaps, it was rather a middle-of-the-road approach in what it was. However, I will say that, and I brought it up at past meetings, that I feel like, the DNR does have quite a bit of documentation to offer. And some of the staffers there who were there during the period of the neighborhood incidents, those who are left would probably have some great insight to offer. And I do not feel like either the city council or this committee or the public at large was given adequate information about these neighborhood topics. And as this is the Parks Committee, I will respect that and kind of keep my comments to Riverside Park. However, I brought it up when you were present the last time this came up, Mr. Peckham, that I don't understand the depth or the lack of depth in which the DNR provided or did not provide information on this. And I've got just a few references that I was hoping to go over in the past. I'll pass this one perhaps to Mr. Smith, and the other one. And just one example, I'll pass this way. I guess I'm confused about a few things. I mean, there are three things we know: that dioxins were found on the western side of the park near the culvert area in exceedance of Wisconsin DNR state soil standards. We know that's impacted city property, city park property, and we know that up until this point that the city has kind of taken the position we're not going to pursue further testing or investigation of that area. But looking at that western side, Mr. Smith may have them now, I think in order to understand that toxicologist conclusions and perhaps be confused by some of them, we should look at historical imagery of that park area, of the residential area south of the park. My understanding is, just as one example, that, Silcrest, Crestline, Waleco, S&E, the use of pentachlorophenol at that factory, that started roughly in 1945, thereabouts. So I'm rather confused why the city or the state, because I assure you, I think they have a wealth of historical aerial imagery, has not looked at what the dynamic there has been. And I think by doing that, I had some follow-up questions. So did you, Mr. Peckham. I don't think we ever got a response from the state. That was around September 23rd or 24th. But in those documents, what we see at the edge of that park is, first of all, we see stacks of material scattered very close to the culvert area in question. Now, what I had found out is that there is a triangular building in those pictures, that it's no longer there. And apparently in 1986, when S&E was undergoing this remediation program, they had drums of waste, and they asked numerous groups, waste disposal, waste storage facilities, will you take this? And they all said, no, we will not accept it. And numerous groups, these are chemical waste disposal and waste storage groups, they would not accept that waste. So for some reason, it was thought, we will use the former cold storage building along the western edge of Riverside Park to store waste with dioxin in it, and that was the reason many of those groups would not take it. And I'm just a little confused as to why these topics weren't even brought up when they seem relatively pertinent to the discussion at hand. And there are also questions about, so what, if you look at the county and city GIS mapping data, they have some aerial imagery from 1974 that's publicly available. It's on the cleanwausau.com site with some other government information. But I don't understand, if the city and the county and probably the DNR had this data, why there was never any analysis at all about what was next to that culvert area in the past. And I'm passing around, this will be the last example, or second to last, I'll make it quick, but you know, just things that have happened in that park. And what I'm asking tonight is that the city and this committee stand with the people it serves. I'm not here to criticize. I'm saying if we can do more tests to define the extent of that contamination, why would we not? Because it seems like corporations that have existed to the west of the park, and several of them apparently from that second example, there has been contamination in the park. Apparently a rather significant petroleum spill into the park from 3M that the city was notified about in 2013. And apparently 3M just left it there in the soil. I believe the technical term for doing nothing is natural attenuation. And they have just left it there. And why didn't the people know this? Why weren't we told this? And why doesn't the city stand with us to make sure that these companies clean up their mess? So I am here tonight to request further testing, and I would ask that this be agendized on the November 13th City Council meeting agenda, because there is further information on this that I believe is significant, but it would be more appropriate for the City Council. Thank you.
Any other comments on that topic?
Well, and thank you for bringing this too, Mr. Killian. These are diagrams I've not seen yet, and an extent of possible contamination that extends essentially to the water line. I certainly would support further testing to get a better idea about the extent of possible contamination, and if there is considerable contamination that needs to be dealt with, then I'd also be interested in remediation. So, again, thank you, and testing is something I would support.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Killian, looked at that one illustration where the storage of those barrels were. Since that building's no longer there, do we know where those barrels are now? Where did they go?
I mean, yes, Mr. Smith, I think the DNR would be a good group to ask, and I do believe from my reading of the documents that they ultimately found a waste storage or disposal facility, so they were able to ultimately, I don't know what the time frame was, find some place to dispose of that.
Okay. I was just wondering to make sure that they didn't just disappear one night at midnight and nobody knew where they were after that.
No, my understanding is they ultimately found some place to put it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other thoughts, Mr. Gisselman?
I would second Mr. Neal's. I trust that was a motion.
Again, since this is an educational item on the agenda, I don't know if it's actionable. So how do we address it in council without committee action?
I think it's going to...
Just waive the rules, suspend the rules, and... Okay.
So we can suspend the rules and take action on this, Ann?
At council, yeah.
At council.
Action tonight.
Okay. So we can't actually vote on taking any motions on this today, I don't believe, right?
All right.
Just to, I guess, reiterate my position, I think that our responsibility as city council members extends from one edge of the city to the other. Our responsibility as Park and Recreation Committee members extends to the boundaries of that park. And there was a culvert that was contributing contaminated material to the soil of that park. It's my belief, and I don't know if the state toxicologist would go on record as agreeing, but it would seem to make common sense that the area of the strongest residual contamination would be right at that exit, that culvert. And that's where the testing was done that the toxicologist relied on. And that's what they based their analysis on, that you could spend hours and hours and days and weeks there and not have an issue. So that's what, at that point, I thought, okay, we're good. I went into this thinking we need to do more testing, and I think if we did more testing, I think it would help the public perhaps to get a better idea of what, first of all, it would allow us to know with more certainty that, it didn't all pool, in the flat below the culvert or something. I don't believe that happened, but I think it would be, it would assure the public that the city is concerned about this, but I think it would be, to a degree, I think it would be kind of window dressing, because we've had the state toxicologists, who are pretty smart people, tell us that in the area where it would appear it's worst, it's not unsafe. So I would hesitate. It's unlikely to be visited. There was a news article this past week about that area, and it was described that the state toxicologist talked about danger to the average park goer, and that is not what they did at all. They talked about danger, possible risk to somebody who spent days and days and weeks in the area that's probably the most contaminated. So at that point, I thought, okay, we have fulfilled our responsibility as a Park and Recreation Committee. We're good to go. We don't need signs, we don't need fences, we don't need further testing. But if the committee, it's otherwise, majority vote. Ms. Miller, if you'd like to contribute.
And thank you, Mr. Neal, for answering my question about the tree. As I'm aware that the city would be concerned about, liability and vandalism, is obviously in the 400 block. Moving on to this topic, Judith Miller, 903 Kickbush Street of Wausau. The extent of contamination is not fully known in Riverside Park, in that the cancer risk was not addressed by the state toxicologist. And that is one of the most significant risks from dioxin contamination. Levels of contamination were revealed to be high, as Mr. Killian commented, according to established state DNR standards. There is risk here. This park is owned by the city and open to all members of the public. Yet, as was pointed out, no member of the public was notified of any possible exposure risk. That exposure risk meaning the risk of contracting cancer from dioxin contamination. Without this information, I would ask, should people be confident in recommending that that park be visited by their friends, their children, their neighbors, their families? I don't think that such a recommendation would be wise in the current circumstances. It certainly seems a red flag was raised for more analysis, to wit, more testing. And as committee and council members, you represent me to the city of Wausau, and you represent all the citizens of Wausau. I would ask that you use your power as citizen representatives to recommend that further soil testing in Riverside Park be done and assure our health and safety is protected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry Buer, again, I live downtown, 503 and a half 3rd Street. I am a member of the Citizens for a Clean Wausau, and as I mentioned before, my training is in sociology. I consider myself a social scientist. My undergraduate work was in biology, and scientists deal in probabilities. And given the present situation, I think I differ a bit from conclusions made by the council so far. Until there is further testing, I don't think I would want my grandchildren to play down there for any length of time. And in the summertime, I think some children in the neighborhood play there repeatedly for a good many hours during a given day or given week. Now, from both documents and news articles, I think that the probability that things might be a little worse than expected is fairly high. And I want to make clear that I don't think myself or anybody on the Clean Wausau Committee would challenge this current city council, but I do think in the past, there's at least a couple episodes where past city councils and the DNR have not acted as wisely as they should have, which may lead to the present problem, if the problem is as great as some of us think it might be. But I do want to point out then that if the problem is as great as we think it may be, that, and as further testing might verify, then I think the present council, of course, has the responsibility to do whatever they can and do it fairly promptly. I would like to see more testing done. I hope this committee approves that. I'd like to see it done. I think time is of the essence given the seasons. I'd like to see it done before snowfall, because once the snow is there, it's either harder or impossible to do. So again, like the past speakers, I would encourage that the council or the Parks Committee to push this on to the full council for the next council meeting next week. Thank you.
Very good. Could I ask the mayor if this committee wanted to, could we perhaps we could informally ask the chair of CISM would this have to go through CISM to get to council?
I would want to say that it does, because I want to make sure things are done correctly and properly. To alleviate public fears or whatever, just to answer questions. I've said that all along. But yeah, I would think possibly going through CISM. I don't know how quickly we can get done before council next week. That might be a little tight, but I would agree with what Mr. Bueller said. If we were to do testing, I'd like to get it done sooner rather than later. And I'll talk with Mr. Limman tomorrow about it. And go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Is this not a public health and safety committee?
I don't think so.
No?
I think it's more CISM.
Okay.
That's what, when I was pushing this before, and I was an advocate before the state toxicologists came, I was advocating for this committee to consider pushing for testing. And my conversations with the DNR's hydrologist, Mr. Thompson, I believe, he was, again, hesitant to give us any direction on exactly what we should be doing, but I asked him, and I don't know if this was in any of the correspondence that Mr. Killian was included on, but my impression from Mr. Thompson was that if he was going to have any part in guiding how this testing would take place, that he would suggest 6 tests, and maybe a fresh test right below the culvert, and then a series of tests between the culvert and the river. In the area where the wash, the contaminants would seem to, be headed. Maybe that can be done with 4 tests and save some money, I don't know, but I think we could just go ahead, Mr. Neal.
Well, I don't know, rightfully or wrongly, we have focused on the culvert. I guess they're inherently spooky. I mean, just ask any Stephen King fan. But this diagram, this aerial that was supplied to us this evening, again, which I've never seen before, outlines an area of, quote, approximate extent of residual soil contamination, and I think the image was taken around 2010. It encompasses an area considerably removed from the culvert area, further upstream. The culvert is right around here. We're far away from the culvert to the suspect area that's outlined in this. Now, I don't know how they determined this residual. It says here, this is the estimated extent of residual petroleum hydrocarbons in the soil. So, I mean, we look at the suspect culvert because it's, spooky looking, but this is spooky looking too, and that the extent of that goes right to the edge of the water. So do we, put our eggs in the one basket, downstream, if you will, from the culvert, and not look into something like this that is also indicated as suspect?
I think at this point, because it's an educational item, I think we can individually ask Mr. Gisselman and the mayor to explore whatever, we as council members feel is an area of concern. My wish was not to open up the whole kettle of fish again. And we do know, I use that term a lot tonight, sorry. We do know there's widespread groundwater contamination, and they are attempting through their pumping and stuff to deal with that. They know approximately where the plume is. Perhaps, this could go back to SISM with a request for a general discussion, starting with the idea that, we got, our interest is the park, but we're also city residents and city council members for the entire city, so, consider doing more. But we can't act tonight. Anything else on this? Yes, sir.
Well, just in preparation for our own education, then I think that that Mr. Killian brought forth this evening, I think these should be certainly made available to the rest of the city council. And I'm wondering if there's other documents. Tom may know very well of other things that are out there that have not yet surfaced in front of this committee or the city council. Maybe those should be brought forth. I'm not sure what those are because, we haven't seen them as yet. But I would think that the offices of the city should be really cognizant with regard to the documents that reflect on what has been going on at Riverside Park. We may have to make a major decision with regard to testing in this park, and I think that I need as much information as I can. What I see this evening further reinforces, we have to look at this, and I would want the rest of the city council to have this. Tom, the 3M letter, I think there was a 2-part, or there may have been more of a letter. It seems to have been cut off at the end. And I think those are the types of things that I, for one, would like to see, and as well as the rest of the city council, because it gives us a clear picture of what has gone on there, which leads us to think that maybe we do have to do something.
Yes, Mr. Gisselman, you're right. Those are excerpts, and I will send the committee the full link from the DNR website. And I did too want to clarify on that, on the 3M petroleum spill into the park, that those were indeed separate incidents. So between what had been explored with the Wausau site and then this 3M petroleum spill, and in the DNR files it states that that soil there that's contaminated is around 7.5 feet and deeper in the spot it shows. However, I think this is where we see history and the present collide, because of course, I mean, that is right within I believe the River Edge Trail expansion area. So here is where we start dealing with 7.5 feet and deeper, perhaps. And I'd like to note and thank you for reconsidering testing. I mean, this is my hometown and I love it. And really, my role, I would always rather work with the city in a productive way than any other manner. And I will say that when the toxicologist had stated, due to the 3M retention basin, that there should not be any more runoff, that citizens did verify after that is not an accurate statement. And so we look forward to sharing all of the data and information with the city, but in a way where it's done in good faith. And if there is testing, then under no way can there be a conflict of interest on those taking the testing. So I myself will say that if they have taken revenue or profit from any of the responsible parties, we would not want to see them involved in any way. Thank you.
Good luck, Gary.
Mr. Nutting just pointed out one thing in the letter that, and this, I'm thinking this yellow outlined residual contamination area, that the residual, and this is from 3M, the residual petroleum hydrocarbons are not encountered until a depth of greater than 7.5 feet below the surface.
The remediation is complete and it's closed.
So it's effectively capped.
So, yeah, Mr. Killian touched on something I think needs to be, will have to be addressed, is, you know, the immediate concern is, you know, we got kids playing in the grass. Is that okay? And, you know, do we have future construction on the project that could expose stuff that's best left undisposed, undisturbed? So I think we're a good trail with that, and we can move on to Ms. Polly's review of city contracts with Revi Design and kind of get us up to speed on how things are going there and the vegetation management plan.
Thank you, Mr. Peckham. This was brought forward as an update, kind of what's happening, and an overview of where the city currently has contracts with Revi. I put them all into one update. Just to start off with, and before we get to the River Life project, is the city currently has a couple of different contracts with Revi Design LLC for parking lot number 9, which is near the bus depot, the police and fire department building areas for their landscaping, and then Highway 52 Parkway median where the birds are. They also are contracted for snow and ice removal for the downtown sidewalks. I did speak with Mr. Lindman, who they oversee these contracts with them in the engineering department. And they had stated that for the most part, the snow and ice removal goes very well. They're very responsive to when you need them to come down there. The other part of the landscaping has been a little bit, there needs to be a little bit more work on staff's part to stay in contact with the Revi staff. We had an incident this summer where I wouldn't say half, but a good portion of the irrigation wasn't working on the Highway 52 median. It's something that they, as a company who are maintaining our sites, should bring to our attention and not us bringing to their attention. So that's something we will have a conversation with them about. We have already had that conversation with them initially for the River Life project and what we expect down there as well. So I think we are off to a good start with the context that we have for Revi. But with the River Life, it's done in different phases. So the first phase, which I put in your packet, Jeff, you want to... has been accepted now as of October 24th, and that then starts our extended maintenance and warranty period with them. So Revi Design will be, they have a 2-year maintenance warranty on this entire area, and they have a 3-year warranty period for all plantings. What that does is that they will maintain the areas for a period of 2 years as far as mowing and weed control, or adding some mulch to it. And then for 3 years, they will be responsible for replacing any plants that die. And then there's a stipulation of how many plants that they'll replace at a maximum. Vandalism is handled differently. We have right now an agreement with them that they will take pictures of all vandalism that they see. They will contact us immediately, let us know where it is. Staff will then work with them as to how it will be replaced, when it will be replaced. Some of these planting beds are overly planted right now, and that's by design so that they fill out as maybe 1 or 2 of those. Some of the plants, let's say there's 30 plants in a bed. Once it gets established and these plants get large, if one plant dies within there, it may be our choice not to replace that plant if you won't see the difference. But that is something we'll make a call on as each one is vandalized. And vandalism we do pay for. That is not part of the maintenance agreement. So that will be an added cost to the city to replace anything that's vandalized. However, there is a funding source set aside for that so that we do have that covered. It's not something that we don't have funds for. It's something that's put into to district, I believe.
Is that a big problem at this point?
In certain areas, yes. The most of the vandalism that we've had has been mainly with the irrigation heads. We had at one night 21 irrigation heads knocked off before we even accepted it. So I think it's something that we'll work on. There is fiber in that whole area to add cameras. So I know that our CCIT is working on adding those cameras and where those will be. So, and we have changed our irrigation schedule. The police department has been gracious to add a little bit more bike patrol in there in the summer months. So it's gone down. We haven't seen much lately, knock on wood. But I think that's something that we'll work on, and we have some measures put in place that will be able to help monitor that as well. So hopefully not too bad.
Good. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. So what I wanted to give you as an education, kind of, because there are multiple different plantings down on this phase 1, as there will be with phase 2. I'll bring the same sort of plan if it's desired back for the phase 2 part, which is really, so phase 1 goes from Barker Stewart Island Bridge to, let's say, the wharf. Right now where you can see, well, Wow. Anything north of Wow would be considered phase 2, and I'll bring that forward to you once those plans are finalized and everything's put in. As we have gone through the design, some of those things have changed from our original design. But for phase 1, this is what's been accepted. This is where we start our 2-year maintenance and 3-year warranty period. There's basically 3 different types of plantings along this. So your plan sheets are included in your packet. We have Wausau turf seed, which is the green. And hopefully you can see them better in your packet. If not, I can get you each a better copy where I colored on them. But the green is the Wausau turf, and that is what is mowed to maybe an inch, not quite that, 2.5 inch length. It's your regular grass turf, your lawn that you would have, your lawn seed. Then there's the no mow, which is in the orange. This is an area that really is not meant to be mowed, maybe 1 or 2 times per summer, or as it gets to a certain height. It's typically, we were given, and I would be happy to share this with anybody, I only have 1 copy, but Revi did provide, as required by their contract, a owner's manual to us. We have 2 copies, one in my office and one in our operations shop, that lists exactly what this no-mow, Wausau turf, and prairie grass all requires the standards for it, when it should be mowed, what height it should be. But the no mow is typically at approximate height of 3 to 3.5 inches, and is, when they say no mow, it is mowed, but it's mowed very infrequently, maybe once every 10 days. And then they'll take that assessment by how tall it gets. One of the areas with this that we are going to look at and make adjustments as we live in the space, and I put that in the memo, is if you go down, it's like to this area, you'll see that on the river's edge side, there we have no mow. And on the other side, sorry, I think I got that mixed. Where's the river side? Go to
It might be in the next one.
Yeah, go to, okay, here's better, yeah. So for on the river side where the riprap is, you have no mow, the orange part, and some prairie seed. And then on the, what would be the east side, is turf grass. We've already, if you go down there in the summer, you'll see that the no-mow side is being mowed regularly, at least 4 feet of it, so that there's a buffer strip along the trail, 4 feet on each side. Because if we would leave it like it's designed, you would have 3.5 to 4 inch grasses on the west side of the trail and manicured lawn on the east side. That's where, if people aren't educated on what these seeds look like, it looks like it's not maintained on the river side of it. So we're going to live in these spaces, and if we've already decided that buffer strip, just to keep the trail open, to keep it manicured, it's easy for the mowers to go, that we'll keep that buffer strip along that trail, and we'll look at the different areas of the site as we live in it. Because if Jody, if you scroll down to that first one again, the road that goes by Wausau, so this is all, I don't know what road that is. What road is that? That goes in front of Wausau. Is it First? Or, yeah, okay. River Street, yeah. All of that on the west side between the railroad and the road is all no-mow. And then you have the boulevards on the right side, that's going to be mowed.
Would you again define what no-mow means? I think you said it's not mowed within.
It's mowed every 7 to 10 days, depending upon the growth, and the approximate height is 3 to 3.5 inches. Where the turf, I'm sorry, I got this mixed up. I have it written right here, but I can send you a copy. The Wausau turf area is the one that's mowed every 7 to 10 days, and is 3 to 3.5 inches tall. The no-mow grass area, the turf will get mowed to an approximate height of 3.5 to 4 inches, and the approximate mowing will be every 4 to 6 weeks, so about once a month.
So if you're showing no-mow area along the river's walkway, this is one of the areas where I brought the mayor down and we looked at that, and we were just looking at this with disgust. That
Are you talking about the channel?
I'm looking at a view that shows the river. It's not this view that you have up
Okay.
here, if you want to. Let's go to the next
Bottom
one, please. All right,
Okay.
here.
Yep.
That no-mow area there is right along where you're walking, and it was
Yep.
overgrown, and there was tall grasses around the architectural rocks that were laid there. It was very unappealing. And if that's no-mow, that's no-go in my book. It should be mowed and maintained properly, otherwise you're going to have this wild stuff growing, which we spent a lot of money cutting down. And it's not acceptable in my representation of this area.
So the other part of this area that's along the river, along the top, you'll see the yellow. So that's in between the no-mow and the riprap, is prairie seed. And that is also in quite a few areas. Well, just wait, don't go to that yet. It is in quite a few areas along the channel as well. Now, a prairie seed is different. And so there is the no-mow, which I said along the trail we're going to play with and see if we need to maintain to have that uniform look on both sides of the trail. There is that section of prairie that is planted. Prairie is a completely different type of seed. And I did put information in the summary about the prairie. A prairie takes approximately 3 years to establish. So that's where I put patience as a virtue when it comes to prairie plantings. It's very important because it's usually planted in areas where you also need to have erosion control. It's areas that are hard to get to for mowing because of the slope that you have or the vegetation that you put in there. Prairies are maintained much different than any mowed area. They're usually mowed once a year. They are spot sprayed. They are knocked down in the fall when they are mowed, and they are usually burned every 3 years. That is to get, as you do this over time, that's why it takes 3 to 4 years to establish, is you end up knocking out the weeds and growing and the natives start to take over. So Jody, if you'll scroll down to that picture, this is what an established prairie will end up looking like. This is a small picture of it after 3 to 4 years. It's an area, a lot of people are not used to prairies because they're not very common in urban settings. A lot of people will use them more in rural, or if you're a great place for it is if you abut a park to a natural area, is to have a prairie area. Where they're placed in this project, it was strategic in that they're very steep slopes along the riverbank to put in vegetation that will be something like this versus the first 2 to 3 years do look more weedy. So that's where I wanted to, we do have, I can send you a lot of documentation that they did give us from the Prairie Nursery. That's the seed mix establishment, and it goes into quite a bit of depth about the preparation, the maintenance of it. If you'd like to see it, however, this is what we will hold Revi accountable to. I do have experience with prairies in my previous position, and it is challenging those first 2 years to educate the community on what they're going to look like, because they do look pretty shabby those first 2 years. So this is something I think we'll need to do a little bit more education on. Maybe we'll put an excerpt on our website about what a prairie is, but also we will make sure that we know what we should be looking for each year. And these guidelines are pretty good and pretty in-depth of what we should look for each year down there as well. But also I think some signage, something we don't have down on the River Life project right now that we've typically put in a prairie area is little plaques that stick within the prairie area that explain that this is a prairie area with a little bit of information on them. Not a lot because they're a small sign. But I think that's the area, and maybe we'll walk down and we can walk it together to see if that's the area you're looking for, and I'm thinking that might be. But that one, this is the first year of it. It may look, the prairies areas may look not so good for one more year, and we should start seeing these flowers pop up more and more, and eventually those weeds get knocked out of there. So we can place signage. Like I said, we'll work with Revi throughout this whole project, throughout the whole 2 years that we have. We'll stay on top of them. If they're not maintaining it to the standards that we want or to the standards that were set forth in the design guidelines, we will bring that forward to do something different, whether that's to get a new contractor in there, take it over ourselves, something like that. But as far as the prairies go, that's an area where I'm going to ask for some patience, and I will help educate as much as possible to get those established, because I think those are some of the areas that we might have that concern.
I can just interject. I think the idea of putting signs by some individual plants or clusters of plants would be a very good idea. If you see a few of those, it becomes clear that this is something that's being cultivated and planned and managed, and I think your appreciation of it changes a little bit. So I think this is an area we're going to grow into, and if you could work with her on specific areas of concern, I think that can be rectified. Anything else?
I don't know.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you. Any more on the River Life project overall?
Oh, I did say I'd give an update.
You promised.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Well, phase 1, I said, has been completed, and we're just doing, there's a few minor punch list items, but as far as the the warranty period that's been started, as I said. For phase 2, they're going to be working hard. I know that our goal is, it's still going through the Board of Public Works for some specific things, working with Myron, but the goal is to get the building still done as much as possible this winter, if not completed fully. They're going to be doing some winter wrapping of it to do some things to keep it warm. We have the playgrounds installers for the big playgrounds on site this week to finish up the install of the big playground, putting it on the concrete. We will have the challenge course installers here tomorrow. We're going to get as much done as possible. They're in an area that's not concrete, though they have to dig footings and pour concrete, and the weather is not looking very favorable for them. But they will be on site tomorrow. The goal this year is to get all of the gray concrete in, to get the building completed, to get the planting beds formed, but no plantings will be going in. It's too late for that, and the nurseries don't have the stock. And then in the spring, the only things we hope to have to do is some of the colored concrete. So there's some small sections. The paving of a section of the trail will be done in the spring, but I believe the road was already completed last week or will be completed this week soon. We are hoping to get the road open for the winter, or at least that trail. We're not going to open the trail along the river. We're going to reroute them still along the road, but people will be able to go along that whole area. Right now it's still closed off, but as soon as they pave, that fence will be moved in. And then in the spring, the only thing left we hope to do with the playgrounds is the port-in-place safety surfacing. That was very much related to weather, and it could not be installed below a certain temperature, so that will be done in the spring. So our goal is to keep as minimal amount of stuff to be due in the spring as possible, with hopefully a substantial completion date by the early part of June. That's still being worked out depending upon the building, but we should know that within the next couple of weeks. But they're working hard to get as much done, and the weather's just not been our friend. So still see things happening, though.
Very good. You want to do general project update, or is that it? Stewart Park, need anything on that, or?
For Stewart Park, it's up in here wrapping up, that they're wrapping up the northwest pillar. I believe they should have wrapped it up last week. I have not been up there yet to see. The finial on the southwest pillar is under reconstruction because it was damaged. It got a little bit put to the side, but we found it, and it is being reconstructed. So,
question on that. The timeline on having that finial fixed. Do you have a handle on that?
I do not have a specific date. Okay. I know that they have the finial that was damaged in hand now, and they're putting it in the mold. So I do not have a specific timeline.
There's, the finial that's on the encased pillar. And we had talked about maybe, couldn't that just be transported over to the southwest pillar? If this, maybe have that done and it's done with, and then we don't have to worry about the other one because it's in a box right now. So right. I did notice on the two repaired pillars that the rim around the top, in a couple of places has been, chipped off, cap, thank you, chipped, damaged, and whatnot. I don't know if that's something easily kind of patched up, but it's quite noticeable.
Okay.
And then lastly, it looks like crew did come in and do some clearing of the foliage around the north wall, but it seems like they pretty much did it kind of like wall level, so you can see the wall really well, but up above, those branches up there, when they leaf out again in the spring, they're just going to dip down, and again, you won't be able to see the pillar if you're southbound until it's next to you. So I'm just thinking that whole stand of scrub there just needs to be shaved back even more.
Okay.
It's okay if it goes the other way into the park, but it just wants to go over the street, and we'll be right back where we were. Things get pretty wild in spring, and
sure. Yep, I'll bring that to our operations attention. Yep. As far as the other projects go, if I can answer any questions, we just gave an update on what we've been doing. We're getting ready for Sylvan Hill here pretty soon to start making snow. But if you have any other questions, I can answer those.
Could you just explain the drainage improvement? Was there standing water at the base of hill number 1? And that was a problem that impeded its usability, and now it's going to be better?
Yes, they wanted to make sure that it drained properly so it didn't get so icy. So they built some areas up and spread it out. So I believe that they feel that they've got it to drain properly now, and they're working on some issues on the bottom of Hill 2 as well. But they needed to bring in some fill and spread that out so that it didn't get too dangerous.
Every year a little better.
Yeah.
On the pool free day, I don't know if we need to spend much time on that. It's spelled out for you in her summary here. The Park and Rec Committee's idea was scaled back at Finance, but both proposals, they didn't take our proposal and modify it. They basically came up with a proposal of their own, and both of those are going to go to the council. So it will be up to the proponents of additional free days to speak up and vote. So any questions on that or discussion? Would you, Mr. Nutting?
If I could address back to, on your agenda summary, Sylvan Hill, Tubing Hills, completing work on drainage improvement at the base of 1, etc. Would you ask staff to consider what they need to do once the hill is snowed and prepped? Historically, the last couple of years that not many 61-year-olds are sliding down the hill, but I'm one of them. You start off, and then about halfway down the hill, you stop.
He was fast.
And you've got to walk. You've got to get up and walk a considerable distance just to get off the hill. Now, I can take our sleds and tubes over to Sledding Hill up on above 3M Park, I'm sorry, above 12th Street. That is it. Pleasant View Park. It's a wonderful sledding hill. You start at the top, and it's not even as steep as Sylvan. And you go all the way to the bottom. You go literally to the street if you've got a good sled. But you can't do this on Sylvan Hill. For some reason, they've got some slow down, safety inhibiting coating, whatever. Those tubes just don't slide down the hill.
Okay.
I remember when they used to. You'd literally go up off the edge and go over the embankment. It was fun. Now, apparently that's not safe, but no one got injured in my opinion. But anyway, figure out what they can spray some water on it and
Oil.
get some speed back instead of having to get up off. You want to take a ride sometime when you
Directive
get your
is
first
to
chance.
make it a nonstop trip.
And you'll just look at it and you say, oh, why are we stopping halfway down this hill and we can't get any more speed up?
Okay.
It's-
We'll look into it.
It takes the fun out of it and you're ready to go home after a couple of tries.
All right.
Thank you.
You need to share a tube with me, Mr. Neal, because Mr. Nutting, because I'm sure I've got enough weight to get us through that flat area, and we'll get all the way to the bottom, I'm sure.
Well,
there's
we'll
the
pile a
media.
couple of people on the tube and we still can't get down the hill. You know.
Very good. Good to participate in what we have to offer. Okay, I think we have exhausted that topic, and we have future agenda items. The only thing I know for sure is that we're going to have more information on the makeup of the dog park subcommittee. And anything else that we can think of?
Yeah, I would like an update on Reservoir Park. One time we were looking into replacing the ladder on the slide and getting what we used to call a bucket swing for smaller children could use one of the swings over there.
Yep. Can I give that right now?
Well, you want to, if you can tell right now, otherwise I don't know if that needs to be at the committee. You guys can work that out, can't you?
Yeah, but for maybe the residents that might be seeing, yes. So it's come to our attention. It's the playground is meant for 5 to 12-year-olds, but there is a lot of neighborhood children around there that use it. And the old playground system is different from the new playground system, where there was platforms and a little bit easier things to climb. We will be replacing the slide with a different ladder that goes there. We have it on order. I don't believe it will get it put in yet before it freezes, but we'll put it in right away in the spring. And they are going to be we tried to get these new types of infant parent swing, but with that swing bay in there, you can't have that swing with a regular belt swing by code. So we're just going to put up the bucket swing in, or not the bucket. Is it the bucket? The infant swing in that can be in with a regular belt swing. So we will have one of each, and we will put those in as soon as we get that too. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Anything else for future agenda items, or would one of us like to make a motion to adjourn? Mr. Gisselman and Mr. Neal have teamed up to give us the key agenda of the evening. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, thank you very much.